Which paradox just mind ducks a person? The UK triple lock that people moving to the UK experience. Need proof of address and photographic ID to open a bank account. Need a bank account and photographic ID to rent a place. Need a bank account and an address to get sent your photographic ID. Checkmate atheists. So I know this is just a silly thing, but at my old work, my department was food service. In our prep room, you had to always wear an apron. Always. No exceptions. When leaving the prep room, you had to take your apron off to prevent cross-contamination. The bosses were trying to figure out where to put the hooks. Inside in the back of the door, or outside on the wall. Edit. Always proofread before posting. The ship of Theseus always kind of ducked me. So, there's this Greek dude called Theseus, and he's on a very long boat trip home. His ship needs repair. They stop, replace a few rotten boards, and continue. Due to the particularly strenuous nature of this very long trip, several more of these stops for repairs are made, until, by the very end, not a single board from the original vessel remains. Is this still the same vessel? If not, when did it cease to be? Brace paradox. From Wiki, the observation that adding one or more roads to a road network can end up impeding overall traffic flow through it. The paradox was postulated in 1968 by German mathematician Dietrich Brace, who noticed that adding a road to a particular congested road traffic network would increase overall journey time. Fry becoming his own grandpa. The Boltzmann brain. The idea goes something like this. In any system, there is a tendency for entropy to increase, which is another way of saying that everything tends to spread out. In a room full of gas, the gas fills the room. It does not pack itself in a corner. However, because of the weirdness of quantum fluctuations, it is possible for particles to just spontaneously arrange themselves into more complex configurations. It might take trillions and trillions of years, but if you watched that room full of gas long enough, sooner or later you would see all of the gas pack itself into one corner before spreading out again. Or, you might see the gas arrange itself into a fully functioning human brain, complete with false memories, senses, and a brief spark of consciousness. Of course, entropy would quickly take over again. The brain would dissolve back into gas almost immediately. This is also hideously unlikely. But over an infinite time, the laws of physics tell us this is not just likely, it is inevitable. So which are you? Human, or Boltzmann brain enjoying the briefest moment of your fictional life before you dissolved back into space dust? Edit. While this blew up, glad I was able to share the existential dread of Boltzmann brains with everyone. A few follow-up points. 1. True. This is not really a paradox, mostly just a mind duck. 2. Something I left out of the original post to keep it simple. A Boltzmann brain universe, that is, one briefly conscious brain, is arguably much simpler than the impossibly vast universe we think, we observe. Perhaps it is actually much more likely that you are Boltzmann brain than the human you imagine yourself to be. 3. I'm not a physicist. Hopefully I did a decent job of introducing the concept and answering some follow-up questions. But you might check out the Wikipedia entry, or the PBS Spacetime episode, on the concept to get a deeper understanding. 4. Although philosophically similar to the idea that we're all just the extremely unlikely product of random chance, the Boltzmann brain concept says something physically quite specific and distinct. That there is no universe. You are the only thing that exists, and only for a moment, and that by a certain interpretation, the laws of physics say this is likely. 5. On the other hand, yes, this is exactly like the DVD logo hitting the corner of the screen. That this page is intentionally left blank page. The page isn't even blank anymore. If you asked Rick Astley for his copy of Disney Pixar's Up, do you think he'd give it to you? Because think about it. He's never gonna give you up. But, at the same time, if he doesn't give you up, then he's let you down. But he's never gonna let you down. So which is it? Pinocchio says my nose will grow after I finish this sentence. Does it? The bootleg paradox. The main example is Beethoven, so I'll use him. If you were to go back in time, you would see Beethoven, But when you get there, you cannot find Beethoven anywhere. But you have all of his music sheets. So you create all of Beethoven's music, so technically, you are Beethoven. Now the real question is, where did the music come from? How did the name Beethoven come to be? Edit. There. I put in periods. Edit 2. If you could go back in time. Psychology. Psychology is defined as the study of the human brain. That would mean that the human brain is teaching, studying, and learning from itself all at the same time. In a sense, the brain is the teacher, the textbook, and the student at the same time. One of my favorites is Zeno's paradox. In order to leave my apartment, just for example, I have to walk halfway to my front door. Then I have to walk half the remaining distance. In half that distance, ad infinitum. In theory, I should never be able to reach the door. Now I love this paradox, because we've actually solved it. It was a lively, well-discussed debate for millennia. At least a few early thinkers were convinced that motion was an illusion because of it. It was so persuasive an argument that people doubted their senses. Then Leibniz, and/or Newton, developed calculus, and we realized that infinite sums can have finite solutions. Paradox resolved. It makes me wonder what calculus we are missing to resolve some of these others. Edit. A lot more people have strong opinions about Zeno's paradox than I thought. To address common comments. 1. Yes, it's Zeno, not Zeno. Blame autocorrect and my own fraught relationship with homophones. 2. Yes, there are 3 of them. 3. If you're getting hung up on the walking example, think of an arrow being shot at a fleeing target. First, the arrow has to get to where the target was, but at that point, the target has moved, so the arrow has to cover that new distance. But by then, the target has moved again, etc. So the arrow gets infinitesimally closer to the target, but doesn't ever reach it. 4. Okay, you think you could have solved it if you were living in ancient Greece. I profoundly regret that you weren't born back then to catapult our understanding 2 millennia into the future. 5. Yes, I agree Diogenes was a badass. I hope this covers everything. The Banach-Tarski paradox is one hell of a mind duck. It's basically taking something and rearranging it to form another exact copy of itself while still having the complete original. Like taking a sphere, which has infinite points on it, and drawing line from every point on its surface to the center, or the core of the sphere. Then you separate the lines from the sphere, but because there is infinite points you now have an exact copy of the original sphere. It's kind of hard to explain here, so just watch the source video on it for a more in-depth explanation. Jim is my enemy, but it turns out that Jim is also his own worst enemy, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, Jim is actually my friend, but because he is his own worst enemy, the enemy of my friend is my enemy. So, actually Jim is my enemy, but can a man drown in the fountain of eternal life? Takes experience to get most decent jobs, but how do you get a good job without experience? Paradox Interactive, every time they release a new DLC, everyone loses their damn minds. Cole's Law. Very simple. Some love it, but I can't stand it. Very common. 2. The coastline paradox. The more accurately you measure a coastline, the longer it gets, to infinity. The infinite hotel one is not exactly a paradox, but still a minduck. A hotel has an infinite number of rooms and can accommodate an infinite number of guests, 1 per room. A traveler walks up to the front desk and inquires about a room. Sadly, it's Infinity Day and an infinite number of people are in town celebrating, so every one of the rooms is full. However, the clever desk clerk realizes he can still fit a traveler in by asking everyone to move into the room number that's 1 higher than theirs. So the person in room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to room 3, etc. Now room 1 is free for the traveler. However, just as the traveler has been accommodated, an infinite busload of people arrives looking for rooms. The hotel is surely full now, right? Nope. The clerk realizes he can ask everyone to move into a room that's twice the room number of their own. So room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to room 4. Room 3 moves to room 6, etc. Now all the odd numbered rooms are empty and can be filled with the new guests. So in a sense, An infinitely full hotel is still infinitely empty. Newcomb's paradox. There are two boxes, A and B. A contains either $1,000 or $0 and B contains $100. Box A is opaque, so you can't see inside. Box B is clear, so you can see for sure that there is $100 in it. Your options is to choose both boxes, or to choose only box A. There is an entity called the predictor, which determines whether or not the $1,000 will be in box A. How he chooses this is by predicting whether or not you will choose both boxes, or just box A. If the predictor predicts that you will 2 box, he will leave box A empty. If he predicts that you will 1 box, he will put the $1,000 in box A. He is accurate an overwhelming amount of the time, but not 100%. At the time of your decision, the contents of box A, that is, whether or not there is anything in it, are fixed, and nothing you do at that point will change whether or not there is anything in the box. It is a paradox of decision theory that rests on 2 principles of rational choice. According to the principle of strategic dominance, there are only 2 possibilities, and you don't know which one holds. Box A is empty, therefore you should choose both boxes to get $100 as opposed to $0. Box A is full, therefore you should choose both boxes to get $1,100 as opposed to just $1,000. Therefore, you should always choose both boxes, since under every possible scenario, this results in more money. But, according to the principle of expected value, choosing one box is superior because you have a statistically higher chance of getting more money. Most of the people who have gone before you who have chosen one box have gotten $1,000, and most that have chosen both boxes have gotten only $100. Therefore, if you analyze the problem statistically, or in terms of which decision has the higher probability of resulting in a higher outcome, you should choose only one box. Imagine 1 billion people going before you, and you actually seeing so many of them have this outcome. Any outliers became insignificant. In terms of strategic dominance, 2 boxing is always superior to 1 boxing because no matter what is in box A, 2 boxing results in more money. 1 boxing, on the other hand, has a demonstrably higher probability of resulting in a larger amount of money. Both of these choices represent fundamental principles of rational choice. There are 2 rival theories: causal decision theory, which supports strategic dominance, and evidential decision theory, which supports expected utility. It is pretty arcane but one of the most difficult paradoxes in contemporary philosophy. Robert Nozick summed it up well. To almost everyone, it is perfectly clear and obvious what should be done. The difficulty is that these people seem to divide almost evenly on the problem, with large numbers thinking that the opposing half is just being silly. Edit. I made some edits to make it clearer. Edit. There are also an offshoot of Newcomb's paradoxes called medical Newcomb's problems. I've been in a situation like this before. I'll describe it. I went on an antidepressant, and there's a history of manic depression in my family. My psychiatrist told me that for some people, antidepressants bring out their manic phase, and they find out they have manic depression. They already did have manic depression, so it doesn't cause it, it just reveals it. She told me to watch out for any impulsive decisions I'm making, as that can be a sign of a manic phase. I was in line at a convenience store and thought, should I buy a black and mild? I don't really smoke, but for some reason it seemed appealing. Then I realized, that seems like an impulsive decision. But, if it is an impulsive decision, and I go through with it, and do indeed have manic depression, then I should just do it anyways. After all, it's not making me have manic depression. It's simply revealing something to me that I already had. On the other hand, if I don't do it, then I have no evidence that I have manic depression, meaning that there truly is less evidence, and therefore I have no reason to believe that I have manic depression. Expected utility equals don't buy the black and mild. Strategic dominance equals buy the black and mild. These situations aren't quite as easy to see, but they're interesting anyways. I'm doing quite well now and all indication is that I do not have manic depression. My absolute favorite is the free will paradox. If God exists as is stated in the Bible, then he is omnipotent, all-powerful, has the ability to do literally anything one could conceive of. Omnipresent is everywhere at once at all times within all of time. Omniscient knows literally everything. The complete summation of all knowledge that has existed, currently exists or will exist. The Bible also states that God gave man free will, the ability to believe what you want, do what you want and be in control of your own life. We choose to believe in God or not believe in God, be good, be evil etc. Even in all God's power he won't influence our choices directly. They are completely our own. The issue here is this: if God is omniscient and knows all things, then he knows our past, present and future. He knows every tiny little detail about our lives, beginning to end. Even if there are multiple timelines, he knows every detail about alternate reality as too. There is not one single fact unknown to God. If this is in fact the case, and God created all with full knowledge of everyone's entire life, then free will cannot exist, as our future is known and predetermined. If not, then God is not omniscient and is an imperfect and flawed being capable of failures and mistakes. Either God gave us free will, or he is omniscient, but it cannot be both. The unexpected hanging paradox. A prisoner is sentenced to death, and he is told that he will be hanged on a day next week, and on the day he won't be expecting it. The prisoner thinks to himself, well, if they hang me on Saturday, then I will expect it because there is no other possible day, so it won't be on Saturday. Then he realizes, well, it won't be Friday either, because I know that if I make it to Friday, they won't hang me on Saturday, so it has to be Friday, which means that they won't hang him on a Friday. He realizes this logic would continue for each day of the week, and so he concludes that there is no possible day for them to hang him unexpectedly, so he thinks they must not plan to hang him. On Wednesday they hang him, and he is completely surprised. The more you think about this paradox, the less sense it makes. The universe either has to be infinite or we're in a box. However, if you ever reach the end that closes the universe in, it would be impossible for something to not be on the other side of the enclosure, at least to us, since nothingness doesn't really exist in human perception. The halting problem. You cannot create an algorithm that looks at a different algorithm and its input, then decide whether or not that algorithm will reach the end. This is too complicated to prove in a single Reddit comment. So, watch this video if you are interested. Edit. Oh, bugger. I'll prove it myself. Consider this scenario. Algorithm P is a copier. Give an input, and it will output that same thing as two separate outputs. Algorithm H is the algorithm that predicts whether a different algorithm will reach the end. It will halt. It accepts two inputs, the algorithm and the input for the algorithm, and outputs yes if the algorithm halts and no if the algorithm doesn't halt. Algorithm F is algorithms that says hello if it's given the input no. It gets stuck in an infinite loop, doesn't halt, if it's given the input yes. Now combine all three of these algorithms in order to make algorithm X. Feed algorithm X as the input to algorithm X. First thing that will happen is that algorithm P will spit out two copies of algorithm X and gives them to algorithm H. Algorithm H now has to decide whether algorithm X will halt if given algorithm X. If algorithm H says yes, X will halt. It will cause algorithm F to get stuck, and therefore X will not halt. If algorithm H says no, X won't halt. It will cause algorithm F to just say hello, and therefore X will not halt. Either way, algorithm H is wrong. It's impossible to design an algorithm that can correctly predict whether any arbitrary algorithm will halt given a given input. How anything began. Whether you believe in creationism or the Big Bang etc. Where did the beginning come from? God had to have started at some point. Those atoms that exploded into the universe had to come from somewhere. Where the duck did anything come from? Not a paradox, but a minduck. Imagine a drop of water forming at the tip of a leaf in the Amazon jungle, high up in a tree. That drop is teeming with life, right? Microscopic life forms, interacting with each other, living their life, right? Kinda as if it was a tiny world, or a tiny universe in there. The life forms in there more than probably have no idea they are in a water droplet. They have no idea there's a whole world beyond it. They're so ducking tiny, how could they know? I mean, we don't know what lies beyond our observable universe, do we? That drop falls towards the floor, and during its fall, life in there keeps thriving and keeps going on, and then the drop hits the floor, a hot stone, and evaporates. Poof goes the entire micro world. Gone. in the blink of an eye, and not a single life form in that drop could do anything to prevent it. I mean, even if there was intelligent life in it, it simply might not have had the means to discover what lies beyond their observable universe. The water droplet. They had no idea they were in a droplet, falling to their inevitable doom. For them, the time it takes for the droplets to form and fall down might feel like an eternity, even if for us it's really short. After all, humanity feels like an eternity for us. But on a historical scale, we've existed for a ridiculously short amount of time. Entire civilizations might have existed in there while the droplet was forming and falling. Imagine that our observable universe is the water droplet and we are the life forms teeming inside it. For all we know, our universe might currently forming on a leaf or even falling already, and at some point we'll hit the floor and we'll be gone. Just like that. Nobody will give a duck, just like we don't give a duck about that tiny universe in the water droplet that just disappeared. We might be one of the many universes that disappears like this. Just like that water droplet is one of the many, and not a single person could have known or prevented this. Gabriel's trumpet. Imagine a horn shaped like this, but is infinitely long. Let's say the diameter at the start is 1 foot, and every foot of length, the diameter is cut in half. Now let's figure out how much paint it takes to paint the inside of the horn. Well, that's infinite. It has an infinite length, so it has an infinite surface area. But wait, there is upper bound for the volume of this horn. You can intuitively put a box around the first 2 feet and realize that as the horn gets thinner and thinner, it can fit in the space left in the first 2 feet. So then if you were to just have a bucket of paint the size of that box, you could just dump all the paint in there and it would fill up the trumpet, right? But yet, it has an infinite surface. So maybe not. Of course we have free will, we have no choice. The birthday paradox. Read that in a room of 23 people there is a 50% chance that at least 2 people have the same birthday. In a room of 30, the chance jumps to 80%. At 40, that jumps to almost 90%. The catch though is that you will never reach 100% unless you have a room of 367 people, that is. The pigeonhole principle. Pretty cool. The math is legit. Edit. Yes, I know that this is leaning more towards statistical probability than traditional paradox. The nature of its compounding power of exponents and the absurdity of the result, however, contributes to it being a veridical paradox. Thus the mind duck. Also, it is 367 days, inclusive taking in consideration a leap year. If you go back in time and kill your grandfather before your parents were conceived, then you could never have been born. If you were never born, then you never went back in time and killed your grandfather. That means you were born. However, it also means you did kill your grandfather, which means you weren't born. I'm upvoting this because it's been a long ass time since we got a paradox question on the front page. You could technically create everything, every movie that has ever existed, even entirely new movies, secret documents, by typing 0s and 1s on your computer. What about the Song of Storms from The Legend of Zelda? In The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, you travel through time between child and adult by using the Master Sword, and doing so you can come back to certain areas to get different items from both times. Well, one song that you learn is called the Song of Storms, and you learn it by going to the adult time and talk to a guy in a windmill. He tells you about a kid that came in 7 years ago and played a strange song and messed up the windmill and teaches it to you. After learning the song you can now go back to being a child and go to the guy in the windmill and play the song to him, despite not knowing it before as a child. So questions are, where did the song come from and who taught who the song? Did the windmill guy teach it to Link, or did Link teach it to the windmill guy? Could a god like that microwave a cheese and bean burrito so hot that even he himself cannot eat it? If he can't, that's something he cannot do, and therefore he's not omnipotent. If he can, then he cannot eat it, which is something he cannot do, therefore he's not omnipotent. In other words, true omnipotence is impossible due to the existence of microwavable cheese and bean burritos. A paradox? You mean one of those things that can destroy the universe? When I first started dating my now wife, she told me she had an abuse fantasy, and she wanted me to try it. The paradox is that you can't abuse someone that wants to be raped. I really had a hard time getting her to see my semantical stance on that one. The universe and therefore all physical space is either infinite or there is an end to it. That means that either an infinitely large thing exists or there is a physical line over which nothing exists. Both of those things seem impossible, but one or the other must be true. This is actually an axiom, the exact opposite of a paradox. Incidentally, the exact opposite of a paradox is in fact a paradox, which is a paradox in itself. Time was created a long time ago. Not necessarily a paradox as much as a minduck, but it's a theorem in math called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Formal mathematics can be thought of as the study of systems of axioms, and what you can prove from those systems. Axioms are essentially your base assumptions, and theorems are just different successive ways of combining the axioms to prove some larger statement. Gödel proved that, so long as your collection axioms can model basic arithmetic, which is to say basically any collection that isn't stupidly simple, there will always be things that are both true and unprovable with your axioms. It doesn't matter how many you have. Always. This was pretty unnerving to mathematicians of the time. My fav. Ones are anything related to time traveling and changing the future so that the traveling back in time wouldn't be necessary and therefore nobody traveled back in time and changed the future. To say it quite simple. For sale. Daniel Boone's original axe. We have replaced the axe head once and the handle twice.